Okay, let's get to the fallout from the Texas law. So this has been fascinating, really, to watch. Also, I heard you. I apologize for the last time I did not explain the private right of action within the Texas law. And so that's actually important. Marshall, can you break that down for people on what exactly it is? Not only does the Texas law ban abortion after 6 weeks, known as a so-called heartbeat mechanism, but it includes, and this is probably the most contentious part of it, private right of action. And this matters, everybody. I promise, in terms of what the corporate fallout from this has been.
Yeah, so the way it effectively works is if a citizen, a resident of Texas, discovers that an individual, a clinic, people involved in the actual process, this could hypothetically even go to a Uber or Lyft driver who actually takes the person to a abortion clinic, is involved, they can actually sue that person.
Okay.
They could actually
privately,
they could privately sue, establishing a civil claim there, which has created a huge amount of controversy, obviously, because in effect, this is deputizing fellow citizens, residents, et cetera, in the cases that these actually go beyond that 6-week period, which has caused an incredible amount of controversy and has forced anyone wading into this issue to really have to think about their actions a different way. Because just to add the quick thing, the South has been increasing abortion restrictions for over the past decade.
Yeah, that's right.
There's been a consistent effort to push the bounds of Roe v. Wade. You've seen abortion clinics close across the South. What is truly different this time isn't just the 6 weeks, it's really the lawsuits and that private action part.
Yeah, that's right. And I should have explained that previously as to why so many people are upset. So now that context being added, now let's get to what is happening there and how this may play out on the national stage. Because I actually do, look, I think culture wars are actually what is driving most of our politics. And this actually could have a lot of political salience in 2022. So let's put this up there on the screen from The Verge. So what has happened is that GoDaddy, the hosting website, has actually cut off Texas's Right to Life's abortions whistleblowing website, and it might be gone. So GoDaddy gave them 24 hours to find an alternative. Of course, Marshall, this immediately calls to mind things like Parler being removed from the Amazon Web Services. I've spoken previously about how censorship is moving kind of up the levels of technology. And so it used to be that, on the platform itself, we talk about, oh, well, we're going to ban this user, that user, individual for right of action. Then it actually moved up a level to the actual domain hosting. So now it's like, okay, well, we're not going to host your website at all. We're not going to host you on our servers. And eventually, we're going to get to the full ISP, like Comcast should ban X website, so and so. We haven't gotten there yet. Unfortunately, I think we eventually will. This kind of has ignited a discussion, especially amongst people on the right, about the ability for the corporation to cut off the hosting service and all that. I think it's very tricky. I'm curious for what you think because, look, I mean, it's a 50-50 issue. Or, look, if you really want to dig into the polling, it's more like a 60-40 issue. But the gray area in between has, kind of people who are extreme in terms of no cases and extreme in terms of all cases. That gray area isn't necessarily being represented by corporate America. At the same time, it's not like corporate America's job necessarily to represent all of the population. So what do you think about all this, kind of looking at this from a tech angle?
Yeah, so I'm going to request that everyone be hyper nuanced with the discussion we're about to have because it shows how complicated this stuff is. So one, I don't quite think the word censorship perfectly applies to what's happening with the web hosting service. I think the clearer framework for understanding is right to refuse service.
Right.
I think it's entirely reasonable for a private company to say, I don't want to host this website. Because once again, it's a hosting service.
Right.
And there are plenty of hosting services. The claim is not that there's a monopoly on hosting services. The only hosting company in the entire world is GoDaddy, and they've refused service.
Right.
As long as there are other services that can provide it.
Yeah.
Because once again, like that isn't the protected thing here.
Right.
I'm largely fine. I'm completely fine with that. I think it goes in either direction. And as we discussed with the context, in other contexts, I think there's easily a word where I could see someone on the right, not on this abortion issue, but finding their own specific version of that. I have no problem. I do not think, for example, that a conservative hosting site should have to support a pro-abortion site.
Sure.
This or that. I think that's entirely reasonable. Secondly, though, and this is what I really like with you talking about the ISPs, talking about actual internet service providers. For example, when you move into your apartment or your house, oftentimes you could only actually get Comcast.
Yeah. They're like, the house is only wired for Verizon, so that's
is where this becomes deeply problematic. And I would not support a world where an actual monopoly on internet service says, no, we will just not host this content regardless of actually who is web hosting it. There has to be a delineation between a utility, aka an internet service provider, and an individual website. Breaking points, the realignment, I don't feel like we're obligated to host anyone or do anything.
Sure.
The same thing applies to GoDaddy. The same thing does not apply to an ISP. But finally, and this is the most difficult part here, the difficult part here, and this is why this resonated with so many people, is that this is going to change our politics.
Yeah,
this really will. This is actually an issue. As much as we like to say, like poo-poo the culture wars, this actually means something. Regardless of how you feel about the actual individual law, this actually means something. This is a very serious shot against the bow. And there are going to be consequences of making and supporting that decision in either direction. If people aren't aware of that, and they deeply do not understand the country we live in right now.
It's fascinating. So this column we're about to show you, this ignited a lot of discussion on the right. And I think that where you come down on it or not, the analysis within it, I think, is correct. And this is gonna actually create some real battle lines. So let's put this up there on the screen. Matthew Continetti from the Washington Free Beacon. So he writes, did Texas hand Biden a lifeline? So what he gets to in there is the unpredictable politics of abortion in 2022 and 2024. Now, what he points to is Biden's approval rating is sinking, independent voters are against him, Republicans are gaining on Democrats in the generic ballot, Glenn Youngkin is within striking distance in Virginia. By the way, we are going to talk about that when Krystal comes back. There's a dwindling chance that Gavin Newsom might be replaced in the recall. Democrats are already worried about next year's election. Then what happens is that the state of Texas has now come in with this new abortion law. And what Continetti points to within this is that the reigniting of actual Roe versus Wade politics, and what I mean by that is a fundamental change to the system, has the capability to energize the Democratic base and change the conversation away from areas the Republicans might be more comfortable. For example, Republicans, like I said, I predicted earlier in the show, I think are poised for a huge gain in the midterm elections because of COVID, where clearly there's a national dissatisfaction with the way that the Democratic and public health regime is handling this pandemic and their inability to say, this is over. Same thing whenever it comes to the economy. Now, in general, Republicans generally do better on the economy. As we saw with Trump, it was the only area in the entire 2020 election where he remained above 51% water, and that was enough for people to actually still come out and vote for him. So if you keep it focused on those couple things, plus critical race theory, which is, of course, the greatest Republican gift that you could have ever seen, you're going to be in a great spot. As I said, you could even be bigger than the Tea Party wave of 2010. This could change things. And what Continetti points to is the Todd Aiken moment, right? Back in, what was that, 2012? 2012. Whenever he said, I forget what he even said, something about legitimate rape. Anyway, cringe, terrible, and actually is what made him lose that election. So Continetti is saying, regardless of how you feel about this bill, it's going to make it so that the politics of it, every Republican in the country is going to have to come down either for it or against it. Now, look, let's be real. Most Republicans, if you want to survive a primary, you have to be for it. And he points to the private action mechanism in particular as uniquely tailored kind of for liberal narratives around how conservatives view the abortion subject. Now, all that being said, the counter to that, which is what I've also heard quite a bit, is what the hell are you talking about? This is about, being pro-life means you actually have to be pro-life. This law is actually preventing abortions, which means that it's righteous, and that means that we all have to come down on it regardless of the politics. But what we try to do here is look at this dispassionately, analytically, and I do actually think that the Continetti has the potential to be right, as in it has the potential to set the stage for a major cultural confrontation, which in my opinion, based on the politics alone, again, not in terms of how you feel about the issue, could actually negatively affect Republican chances in 2022. I do also think, given the large number of liberals that have moved to the state of Texas, particularly Austin and Moore, this will ignite and change the politics of that state in the future. But that's another segment for another day.
Well, and look, the key thing here is that I know everyone likes to mock the term vote blue no matter who, but if there ever was a case to illustrate why that actually means something, it's this right here. Right now, our politics since Roe v. Wade has been defined by there being a really significant minority in this country of conservative voters who are energized by the pro-life cause. These are the people who were obviously always going to vote for Donald Trump no matter what he did in 2016. If this continues to spread, and I think this is going to continue to spread given the makeup of the Supreme Court, we are going to see the activation of a Democratic voting base that has not cared about this issue. We were debating this with a friend of ours a few weeks ago, and they said, well, look, this isn't going to change politics because of the fact that there weren't that many voters in 2020 who were actually voting on abortion in the affirmative sense.
3% of the entire electorate.
That 3% is going to start expanding now that it has been activated. You're now going to see, I still think Texas is safe for Republicans, but you're now going to see liberals in Texas, not even actually, let's be frank about this for a second, even moderates. I think the number one problem that you have happened, given the echo chamber nature of our tribalist politics, is that conservatives overestimate the percentage of the population that is actually relatively okay with the Roe v. Wade status quo.
Yes.
That is the part that's going to be very difficult here.
Yeah, I think that and you know, like I said last time, I'd rather gouge my eyes out than talk about this, but this is the truth, which is that it is incredibly politically salient. It absolutely could change the game whenever it comes to the Republican map of 2022. Now, how you feel about it or not, I do think that there should be some honesty around the politics, but I don't know. There's also a potential that it doesn't change anything. I do, however, see the GoDaddy situation, kind of the corporate, the kind of corporate pushing of this, and in general, always look to what do the Democrats think that they can win on? There's a reason that Biden and the White House have been hammering this home every single time that they talk about this. And look, the media obviously is all in on their side as well. So as you saw with Afghanistan, with Republicans, that can go for you. It can also go against you, and it usually does whenever it comes to that issue. So anyway, I hope I did a better job this time of explaining that topic.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching.
That's right. Just as a reminder, you can become a premium subscriber today. Watch the full show completely uncut, our reactions to each other's monologues. You get to listen to it. You get to ask us questions, all that good stuff. Link is right there in the description or at breakingpoints.com.
Best of all, great way to say screw you to the mainstream media.